students, I'm Anshul Sharma, your educator for paper 1. So we have been discussing different topics and PYQs related to teaching aptitude in the session, the last lab. But today we're going to start with another unit and we're going to deal with questions related to communication. So we'll be again following the same pattern. We'll see the question and then I'll tell you the answer and then we'll discuss on it. So what will happen? We'll see the past question paper, of course, the questions that we have. So we will be having a fair idea how the questions are asked. And also we will see what will be the concept related to that. So that will enrich our understanding. And whoever have already attended my classes and have done communication with me, for them this would be very easy because these questions are directly coming from whatever we have done. So identify the sequence of stages of message processing. So this is the first question. I'll read again. Identify the sequence of stages of message processing. How do you process a particular message? How do you process and then communicate that message? So the first is action, then internalization, then you have selection, then understanding, and then you have perception. So what do you think will be the correct sequence when you decide what to tell and how to tell? That means how do you communicate? So I'll tell you the answer. The answer is D. That means okay. So the answer is D. This means that the first is E. E means that there will definitely be a perception that we have. So we'll start with perception. This would be the first. Then B would come. That means we will have an understanding related to that particular thing. So this would be the second. Then we have C. We will select what we have to talk and how we have to talk and what will be the medium that I will choose to communicate what I want to say. Then I have B, that means internalization, and then comes the action. That means this will be fourth and this will be fifth. Now let us first of all discuss what actually is communication. So communication comes from this Latin word communis, which means to make things common. That means a person can only communicate with another person if they are on the same page, if they know what they are trying to talk about. Another second most important thing is that a communication is always complete when there is feedback attached to it. That means there is one person talking to another, and if the other person does not respond, does not care, does not value, and there is no feedback involved, then this kind of communication can never be called as a good communication. So there should be two things common, then what you are talking. Secondly, there should be feedback. All of these two things will make your communication as a perfect and an effective communication. So when we talk about the stages of processing, this is somewhat related to the elements of communication and the process of communication. So let us first see. First of all, I told you there should be perception. So what you are doing, you are actually perceiving. Perception is a process. And here you are consisting that there will be three phases that we can use to make the sense of the message we encounter. We will select, we will organize, and we will interpret. There would be definitely something that should make sense. So that means there should be a perception about something. Then there is always an understanding. Understanding is that every receiver who enters into the communication process brings with them their own ideas and their own influences, their own cultural background, their own ideas, their own values, right? And this will influence the understanding of their own message that they are trying to respond or that their response will be to, right? This means that it is the job as the sender to make the things or make the ideas and the feelings into a considerable amount of situation, and then you draw up the message. So what is happening? If I am the one who is trying to communicate with someone else something, then I have to choose that mode or that medium that I know that the other person can definitely understand. Then we have the selection. So the next step in the message processing is the selection of an appropriate message in accord with the priority and then responding to them. So there are two things that are involved when we talk about selection. What to talk, of course, that is already going in your mind, and what is the medium through which I have to contribute or I have to use when I say I'm gonna talk to the other person or deliver my views to other person. There are various queries put into the sequence in a query. However, appropriate message needs to be, or a medium needs to be selected on a particular basis for the purpose of clarity indicating the response. So the most important thing is that there should be clarity, that the other person would understand what you are saying. Then there is internalization. So this process is an important step in message processing. It is basically including the, you can say, the decoding and the encoding of the messages happen when we talk about internalization. So here you are trying to convert the message into something and in a codable manner so that you know that the person would get to know it, right? So in this message processing, as the message needs to be understood by the receiver in order to understand the request and the response and to respond accordingly. So basically, after that, when you have internalized what you want to say, there would be an action that you would be taking. So this is the final stage in which the message processing is done, and taking action is important from the point of view of completing the question posted by the client and then answering to them, right? So this is basically you are taking an action. You are now starting to talk. So what is the first thing that we are doing? The first thing is that I am going to perceive and I have a perception of what to talk about. Then I will be having an understanding about that particular thing. If I don't have understanding, then how will I articulate that particular thing? Then there would be selection of which medium and which things to be communicated and which to be left behind. Then there would be internalization. It should be coded and decoded or decrypted in such a manner that I know that other person would understand. And then at the end, I'll take an action, right? So one thing that comes with this question is the process of communication. So let us discuss what is basically the process of communication. So let us begin. What is communication? Communication, as I told you, is a transfer of message or opinion to someone. So it is to make things common. Here we are trying to say that there is a sender and there is a receiver and they are trying to communicate with one another. So there is a sender and there is a receiver. There are few things that both of them would do. Now what is it? So first of all, there will be a sender. Sender is the person who is sending the message. Then what will happen? There will be a message that they have decided, message that he thinks he wants to communicate or to tell to another person who is the receiver here. So what will be done here? This will be encoding. So encoding is basically a packaging of your message. So you are packaging your message, that is encoding of your message. Encoding is putting those messages in such a manner that you know that the other person would be able to decode, that means to understand the message as well. So this is encoding. Then there is always a channel that comes into being. So this channel is the carrier of the message. So A is here, say A is a person and an employee of an office and this receiver is the boss. So A will say, I want to take a leave. So what will happen? This is basically the message. And what will be the message like? The message will be in a proper formal manner because he is talking to the superior. Now there are different kinds of message and we know that if the receiver is a boss, that means there will be formal structures that we would be using. So A would say, or the sender would say that I request you to grant me a leave. And this would be the message. But what would be an appropriate medium choosing for that? So the medium for a boss would never be a telephonic conversation. Rather it would be an email. So here, email is kind of a channel that the sender would choose. Then the receiver would receive the email. And if the message is encoded properly, that means it is grammatically correct, the timings are correct, and if the receiver is on the same page, then he would understand. The boss would understand that yes, I have to grant a leave. And then what will happen? He would decode the message. Now decoding of the message is now breaking that message so that you understand it. He will try to understand and again a channel would be chosen and the message would be delivered. Now this delivering of the message is called as the feedback. And without feedback, the communication process can never be completed. While all of these elements are important, as I told you, one of the most important element that pops in between is the noise that is ever present. Now, what do you mean by noise? Noise are the barriers to communication. These are the barriers or the disturbances or the disruptions that fall in between when the communication is happening. So here, what can be a barrier? There can be physical barriers, or there can be semantic or psychological barriers. Say the boss was very angry because he had a huge fight with his wife. So what will happen? He won't be in a right head space, and he would say, I will not grant you a leave, and he will write a message, and of course, he would scold the sender. So this can be a barrier. Why? Because he was psychologically not well. So these all barriers would pop in between, and these are inevitable. They will definitely come in between. But a good communication is that process which has feedback and which tries to avoid the barriers as well. So these barriers can be as simple as physical barriers. Like maybe the sender was trying to send the message, but the Wi-Fi was not working. So this acts as a barrier in between communication, or delayed in the message can also be a barrier. So there can be barriers, and all these things, the sender, encoding, message, channel, receiver, decoding, and noise, and all of these are the elements to communication. So I hope this process was clear. Now the next question, the positive impact of communication depends upon what? What can you say that has a positive impact on the communication? Acceptance of barriers, planning, sudden expression, media selection or medium selection, these are both the same thing, then use of language. So what do you think will be the correct answer? The answer is B. That means B, D and E. Okay, so do you think acceptance of a barrier is a kind of communication that can be impacted and my communication depends on it? Definitely no, not. So the acceptance of barriers should not be there. I should try to eliminate, because my good communication can only happen when there are no barriers in between. So the positive impact of communication is never going to happen when there are many glitches, many entrophies or many barriers in between. That means A can never be the right option. So wherever you find A, you can strike it out. Then we have sudden expression. So do you think if I have a lot of expressions on my face and they are all contradictory to one another, will you be able to understand what I'm trying to say? No. So there should be you cannot say that there can never be expressions. There should be sequential manner, or you can say there should be correspondence between those two non-verbal and verbal communication that you are going to portray to someone. So also I would like to here explain that what is basically expression. So expression are the non-verbal communications that come in between. You can never delete these non-verbal communication. It is also said, and it is a Mehrabian model as well. So Mehrabian is a scientist who talked about it. So he said that when we are talking, most of the time, 55% of the time, the communication is loaded with non-verbal expressions, non-verbal communication, non-verbal clues. You can never do away with them, and they are important. So when I'm trying to communicate with you, my communication should be in direct sync with what I'm trying to say. So my words and my expressions should be on the same page. What if here sudden expressions are shown? So if I'm happy but I make a face that I am too angry, so this will make you confused and the message will never hold that importance. That is why this should definitely be avoided. So C would be eliminated wherever it is. That means we have the correct option. There should be planning. Correct planning will give you good outputs. Then there is a media selection or medium selection that is very important. If a wrong medium is selected, then the message will not be delivered or it can create problems. So say I am trying to communicate to my friend that I want to meet him. So but what is happening? I'm sending an email. And we all know that we tend to check our emails really late. So without calling, I chose that email is a good option. So do you think in informal communication, email should be chosen? That is why a good selection of medium should be there. Then use of correct language should be there so that there are no glitches or it is easily understood by the other person, right? So hence we have B as the correct option. Then, according to Robin et al., now this is a person who is talking about organizational communication, right? So you should know, and this was a question asked in 2021. That is why it is somewhat a typical question. That is why I have the answer and we'll be discussing it. So according to Robin et al., now what is et al here? Some of you will ask that et al is basically, this is a book written, whatever we are talking, this business communication model, this is written by Robin, but there are other people also who contributed in it. So those are signified by et al. That means there are other people also here who have written about this. So according to Robin et al., the sequence of communication function is what? So wherever you see the word Robin, you should know that here we are talking about organizational communication. So there are options like A, control, B, motivation, C, emotional expressions, then information. And what would be the correct answer, or what would be the correct sequence? You have to tell me. So the correct answer is D. But let us read the explanation here, because a lot of people would be unclear when it comes to this question. So communication is basically defined as the imparting or exchanging of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium and successfully conveying what you want to share. So it is sharing of ideas, sharing of feelings, sharing of facts, anything can be communication. Some key points. Communication plays a very critical role when we talk about an organization communication. Without communication, a whole structure of organization would fall apart. So organization communication can be defined as a process through which the organizations are formed, and as a result, the events are formed and shaped. Right? So communication is the route. To achieve a shared understanding of the information, it is necessary to communicate inside an organization. So without communication, of course, the two departments won't be able to work. So we have Robin et al. And PS and Judge, and there are other people also who have written this work called as Fundamentals of Organizational Behavior, and they articulated basic functions of communication when we talk about the organization communication. So the first is control. So communication influences the member behavior in a variety of ways. So there should be proper control on the things you want to communicate, and you should understand those particular things as well. Then there is motivation. Communication provides the motivation for getting the things done. If you want something to be happen, something to be done, then you should be motivated and you should know how to talk about that particular thing. Then you have emotional expression. It provides an opportunity for an employee to express their emotions. So without any emotion, without any expressions, without any emotional quotient, you can never communicate. So in a communication, there should be control on your words. Of course, there should be motivation, otherwise you won't be able to talk. Then there should be emotional expressions. There should be good emotional depth in whatever you are talking. And then there should be information that you want to convey. It transmits the data to find and then to analyze different options, giving individuals and the groups the information they need to make their own decisions. According to Robin et al., the sequence is as follows: control, then there is motivation. There is always control on a particular thing. You will be motivated to perform. There would be expressions and emotional being, and of course feelings and senses that will help you to communicate. And then there is information. So in a communication part, what is most important? The most important in a communication is control over your words. Is motivation to talk. It is the emotional quotient, the non-verbal things, and then there is the content. So to deliver anything, to talk to a person, you don't only need words, but you need emotions, you need motivation, you need control, and you need the power to express that thing properly. And this is another question. This is list 1 and that is list 2. This is the types of communication, and the other is the different characteristics related to communication, and you have to match it. Now it is a very simple question. Let us see. The first is intrapersonal communication. Then we have interpersonal, group, and mass communication. So between persons, within a small organization, large number of unknown audience, and within oneself. So what do you think is basically intrapersonal, interpersonal, group, and mass communication? So this is a question from types of communication, and you should be clear with the various types of communication that we have. So the right answer is B. That means A would be matched with 4. So intrapersonal communication is that kind of communication when someone is talking to ourself or oneself. Then we have interpersonal. Interpersonal communication is when two people are talking to one another. So it is between persons. Then we have the group communication. So group communication is within a small organization or a small group of people are talking to one another. That would be called as the group communication. And what is mass communication? Mass communication is when a large number of unknown people are talking to one another. Now let us see this table. These are the basic types of communication, and quickly we are going to revise all of them for you. So the first is, I would divide the communication on the basis of the relationship and the elements that are present. So the first is the interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is that communication when two or few number of people are talking. Basically, it is a two-way communication. So when a teacher and a student are talking to one another, it is an interpersonal communication, right? Because it is interpersonal between two people. So it is a two-way communication. Then we have intrapersonal. Intra means it is with oneself. So while I am talking to myself, I will say that it is a intrapersonal. When I am introspecting myself, when I am talking to myself and there is no other person involved, it is a one-way communication. There is no feedback here. Right? Here you will definitely, in interpersonal, you will definitely find feedback. So this is a very important thing. There is feedback present. But whenever we are talking about intrapersonal, I am the one who is giving feedback. No external feedback would be there. I was introspecting, trying to introspect what I did the whole day, and I get my own answers. I decide what I did wrong, what I did right. So this is intrapersonal when I'm talking to myself. Then there is group communication. When a small group of people are talking to one another, this is called as the group communication. And what is mass communication? What do you mean by word mass? When there are masses of people, or you can say when there are a huge amount of people who are talking to one another. Now, some can be confused between group communication and mass communication. So what is the basic difference? Group communication is that communication where at least you know whom you are talking to. You know the faces. So we know that the amount of people is more than 2. So where the teacher is talking to 3 students together. So it's kind of a group communication that is happening. But in mass communication, it is a very heterogeneous group, a very large amount of group that I have, and I don't know anyone. So with mass communication comes the word heterogeneity, and with group communication, it is a homogeneous group. So what is a homogeneous group? Homogeneous group is that group which have the same characteristics. So I am talking to the students who know that we are discussing communication. While mass communication YouTube can be a good example. So a lot of people would actually see this video. Some would be interested, some would be not. Some would be giving this paper, some would not be giving this paper, but can still come across this kind of a video. So what is it? It is a mass communication. Why it is mass communication? Because I don't know who is watching this video. So when this will go on YouTube, I don't know who will click, who will comment. I have no personal contact with you. And there is always delayed or no feedback when we talk about mass communication. But in group communication, there is feedback present, right? So these are the few characteristics. And here it is heterogeneity or no feedback, you can say. Here you have homogeneity. Then we have on the basis of expression. So on the basis of expression, I can say that there are verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So verbal communication is that communication which uses words, as simple as that. So it can be oral, it can be written, or I can also show you the visual aids which has some part written or some part in an oral manner, right? So that totally depends. So basically we have oral and written, but what is the basic thing? I have words that are used here. So words is a basic characteristic. Then I have non-verbal communication. Now this is the most important part of communication that UGC would ask you. So these are that communication part when you don't encounter words. Here you only have expressions and you have the, the emotions, or you can say the feelings, and you have space and you have the touch, and all of these things are your non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication can be of different type, and this will definitely take a lot of time. So I have not written everything, but we can discuss. It is like haptics. Haptics is a study of touch. So haptics is when you know that this kind of a touch is a good touch and this is a wrong touch. So we girls tend to know that yes, this is a touch of a stranger and it is unavoidable, right? So this study of touch is called as haptics. Then there is a study of time as well. So you know that this person is very punctual, so I can rely on this person. That study is called as chronemics. So you know that with time, with this skill of punctuality, with this virtue of punctuality, you tend to know a lot about that particular person. Then there can be kinesthetics. So these are the bodily movements and the gestures that each of us do when we don't even understand. So while talking to you, I am showing expressions. It is a kind of non-verbal communication. I'm using hands. That is kinesthetics. I am moving. All of these things are the non-verbal communication. Then we have the dressing sense as well. So whatever I wear will show you that am I a shabby person? Am I properly dressed? Am I, what is the basic taste of this particular person? So the basic dressing sense of a particular person will tell you a lot about that particular person. So this can be the expressions. Then there can be eye movements. There can be your gestures that we have, and there can be proxemics also. Now, what is proxemics? Proxemics is a study of space. So there are always space that we have for a particular group of people or for a particular person that we have actually created in our mind. So we never tell them that this is the zone where we want you to be, but there are some zones that we have decided for a particular person. So we have different levels. This can be a very intimate area, and I only want my parents or my close ones to be present here. Maybe my parents, right? Most of the time. And then at the other space, there can be my friends. Then at the other can be my colleagues. And at the outer circle is the different world. So all of these things you should study, and we have done all of these things in our class. There is not much time in this video, so I cannot go into proxemics, but it is a PYQ and they have already asked you what is the distance between all these groups and how many rings are actually made when we study about proxemics. Right, so we have done about 10 to 15 types of non-verbal communication and we have discussed them in greater detail. But here I can only give you the gist, right? So we have done all these types of communication. Now we have on the basis of purpose and style. So we have formal communication and we have informal communication. So formal communication is that communication which follow a proper structure. So when I'm talking to my boss, I will have a proper structure when I am communicating something to him. It can be in a proper email manner. It can be with a very respectful tone that I'm using. But when I talk about the informal communication, this communication is without any structure. So it is loose talks can also happen. And because of these loose talks or this loose structure, there is grapevine that are created. So I asked one question, I think in the previous video, that in which kind of communication grapevine structures are created. So it is the informal communication because it has no structure. Loose talks are present here, rumors are spread, and there is always grapevine structures that are created. Right? Then on the basis of direction. So we can have vertical, lateral, or diagonal communication. When the boss is telling you to do something, you'll be following a vertical line, upward or downward. If you are the subordinate is talking to the boss, then it can be upward, or it can be downward when the boss is talking to you. Then it can be lateral, and also it can be diagonal also when two groups are talking to one another. So it can be a diagonal communication. Then we have intercultural communication when two people from two different cultures are trying to communicate with one another. This is a type of communication which is called as intercultural communication. And there are a lot of problems that will come into being because of different culture, different background. There can be prejudice, there can be faulty impressions. All of these things will come in between. They are like barriers. So they should be avoided. Then we have the business communication. That is, in every organization, you need a good communication. So the communication that happens is business. Then it is called as, in a business, it is called as business communication. So this is another question for you. So the list 1 and list 2 are there, and you have to match which type of communication it is. So we have the prayer in silence, teacher talking to the students outside the classroom, the CEO of a company issues a circular to his subordinates, and then we have rumors mongering among the employees in an organization. Right? So you can tell me the answer. So the options are like these, but it is on a different page, so it would be little bit difficult. I'll tell you the answer. So the answer is B. So now let us see. So the first of all, when I am praying in silence. So we just now discussed that when I am praying in silence, I know it is an intrapersonal type of communication. That means I'm talking to myself. Then when the teacher is talking to the students, that means there are a group of people there and they are all talking to one another. This means that this is a group communication. I just gave you an example. When a CEO or a boss is talking to an employee, or a CEO of a company issues a circular. So this is what? This is a vertical type of communication. They can also use the word formal here, right? So it is the formal and a vertical kind of communication where the boss is talking to the subordinate, and then there are rumors and mongering that are coming here. So in this kind of communication is basically an informal communication, and it is called as, the structure that is created is called as the grapevine. Now let us discuss grapevine here. Because we have discussed the other things, I will quickly discuss with this I quickly discuss the word grapevine. So first of all, whenever we think about informal communication, we know that it is a communication that has no structure. So when you have no structure, that means you have less of discipline. When there is less of discipline and less of control, you know that anyone can talk to anyone present there. So whenever we talk about grapevine, this structure should come into your mind. So you must have seen how the grapes are there, right? So this is basically a bunch of grapes, and all of them are in very close proximity with one another. They are attached to one another. So what is happening? This person can communicate to this person, this can communicate to another person. Whenever we are talking about a formal communication, there are some strict rules that are there. So this person will talk to this person and this person will talk to this person. This is how the communication would happen. This means that there will be less rumors, less distortion of message, and less spreading of the unwanted news that is always done when we talk about the informal session. So in an informal communication, you see that anyone can talk to anyone, and there can be rumors, there can be gossip mongering, and all of this will distort the message. The feedbacks would be delayed and the message would be distorted. There can be rumors. So you must have played the game of Chinese whisper, and it used to happen that one person would say something in the ear of another person, and by the end you will see that what was basically the thing that started, and we definitely knew that the word was completely changed. So this is what? This is when passing of the communication, you tend to lose the essence of it, or of course, there can be distortion of the message. This will happen when there are a lot of mouths, lot of views, and this will create rumors. Hence, it is called as a grapevine structure. So let us see this explanation that I have for you. Whenever we talk about an organization, we know that there are official rules. But if you don't follow all these procedures, then it is called as an informal communication. In this type of communication, there is always a spontaneous relationship between the participants. There can be talking in between whatever you are doing, and anyone can talk to any other person. Then the informal communication system is very opposite to the formal communication system. In this system, the communication is made without any procedure and any policy. Informal communication plays a vital role in when we talk about any organizational activities. So for example, in your organization, there is a Diwali party that is going on. So if you have a formal structure, do you think that you can talk to another person without the permission of a boss? Definitely not. That means that in any organization, you need the balance between a formal and an informal kind of communication. Now, there are some structures and these are called as the informal networks. Now, this is also PYQ and UGC has asked these questions that how many types of networks are there. So, there can be wheel network and there can be cluster, there can be probability, gossip and chain. Right now, we are discussing the informal communication networks. So, in which type of communication we see grapevines? We see grapevines in an informal communication. And what is grapevine? This structure is followed whenever we talk about the grapevine communication. Anyone can talk to anyone. And what is happening? I told something to my best friend and I told her not to tell it to anyone. And she will tell it to her best friend. This is how the distortion of the message would happen. So anyone can talk to anyone. So now let us see the different networks of the informal communication. This is a chain. When anyone will see that when Y is talking to D and when D will talk to C and C will talk to B, B will talk to A. This is the same way where the other way we will be talking. So A will communicate to B, B to C, C to D and then to Y. But what if this chain is broken and anyone can talk to anyone? Then it would be an informal communication. In this kind of communication, you can observe gossips. Now, this is a cluster kind of communication or you can say distortion of communication that is happening. Here, this is a gossip kind of network that is created. Here, A has the free access to talk to anyone. So, this is the most appropriate way in which the grapevines can be created. Now, this is the probability. So, what is basically probability? Probability is anyone can talk to anyone. The probability of me knowing all these things is as equal as someone else knowing all these things that happens in my office. So, this is A can tell it if he likes to tell it to someone. Maybe J is left, but D and F know that. And F would talk to G and H or K, and then D will talk to H and X. So, this is how the whole office would know. Some would be left and some would know. There can be clusters also created. Everyone can talk to another person. So, this is how the message will be distorted. But when I talk about a formal structure, so formal structure is somewhat like this structure. So, this is a wheel network here, right? So, take it, right? So, maybe these are a few people present there. And what is happening? Whenever they want to talk to A, who is their boss, it will be X coming to A and talking, then Y coming to A, W and then Z coming to A. So, this is how the communication would happen. There would be, of course, delay in the communication can happen, but there will be no distortion of message and there will be no grapevines and no rumors present here as compared to the other kind of communication, that is the informal communication, right? So, this is what we had for today's class. The most important thing that you have to learn is that there are few kinds of communication. We have the interpersonal, intrapersonal, group and mass communication. We have verbal and non-verbal. We have formal and informal, vertical, lateral, diagonal, interpersonal and business communication. Then we also have classroom communication, and classroom communication is a transactional model. In another video, we will be discussing the models of communication also. So, the things would be clear. So, in a communication in classroom, when we discuss, it is a verbal, non-verbal communication, a transactional model, right? So, all of these words should be clear with you, right? Now, one question that I have for you is that you have to write the 5 types of non-verbal communication. You have to also explain that to me in the comment section. So, it can be like proxemics, haptics, chronemics. I already discussed 3. So, find 2 or 3 more and write it in the comment section. What is your homework? You have to write about the non-verbal type of communication, because this is something that UGC always asks questions from. So, what is your homework? I would repeat, write about 5 to 6 non-verbal kind of communication. So I hope you liked the video. My focus was on the different the different types of communication and basically the elements and the process of communication. These are the two big topics that we covered in these 5 or 4 MCQs that we discussed. So I hope you liked the video. Surely do the homework. I'll check it. Keep smiling and keep studying. Thank you so much.